Thank you all for coming along, and thank you to Tom for the introduction, and also thank you to the Alan Turing Institute for the opportunity to speak at this SODM event. As Tom said, I'm Gavin Meggs, currently at Sky. We have a couple of hours. I've probably got enough material to talk for 45 minutes to an hour. So there's plenty of time for interruptions, questions, clarifications, corrections, etc. But there'll be time at the end as well. I am mic'd up for the live feed, but I've got no amplification in the room. So if you can't hear me, then please give me a wave, and I'll try to remember to speak up. So in terms of material today, I want to start just by giving you an overview of the insight and decision science function at Sky. There's no cell here, even to the BT guy in the room. It's more just so that you get an understanding of how we operate, the data we have access to, the types of people we have in the business, and how that's come together over the years to make us what we are today and to form the basis of where we are going forwards. And hopefully most of you have read the brief. Whilst I will be talking about data science, I'm also be talking about what's important to make the application of data science a success within a large organisation. And part of that is the story of how we got to where we are. So I'll cover that initially. I'll then move on to talk about applications of data science at Sky, and I'll talk about some real applications. Obviously there's an element of confidentiality, but I'll be as open as I can and hopefully give you more than enough to get your teeth into and to drive some interesting questions and discussion. I'll focus on three major areas within Sky: customer marketing, content, and advertising. I'll then move on just to talk about some of the other, what I've called enablers of applied science. So what else do we need to do, having got the smarts from the numbers? What else do we need to do to make the application of that science a success at Sky? And then I'll leave you. Tom was very keen that I included this section at the end. So, well, what are we currently struggling with now? What are I've called them knotty issues. What would I like to do, but I currently can't? And I'm assuming there's at least 5 of you in the room that have got data science or big data in your title or on your CV. So it's probably an ask for some of you guys to get your thinking hats on. And then time for question at the end. So it's a PowerPoint. I've got a few builds, but hopefully not too many. Appreciate that English might not be the first language of everyone in the room. So if you've got any questions around any of the what might be Easter eggs or cryptic things in titles, then do let me know. Sometimes I have been criticised for trying to be a bit too smart in the language used, and then then having to overcome the explanations. So that's the agenda. 5 areas. I've got some signposting throughout, so hopefully we can keep to time. And as I say, if you want me to speed up, slow down, go into more depth, then please let me know. So starting off with insight and decision science. So this is a department within Sky. I'll show you how we're organised in a moment, but I wanted to start by talking about how we came into being. Before I get into IDS, I skipped a bit about me. So my background, I did an arts degree in AI at Sussex University, which is where I first met Tom only 28 years ago. I worked for 8 years at BT's research labs up at Martlesham, then worked through Shell, Orange, Norcom, a couple of years at Ernst Young on a secure government programme. But for the rest of the time, which is largely from 2005, I've been working at Sky or with Sky. So we look at this is my journey with Sky began back in 2005. I joined a company called Clarity Blue, which was a marketing services organisation. And Sky, we had lots of financial clients, marketing clients, retail clients, effectively working as an interface between businesses and data providers, Experian, Equifax, etc. And we effectively did the stuff that most internal analytical teams didn't want to do. We worked with prospect data, and we did what was called acquisition marketing. So using third-party data to understand who's out there in the market, deduping those that are already customers, and then managing the marketing services around that, including provision of software to run campaigns and so on. So that's where we began with Sky in the summer of 2005. Quickly became clear that Sky it had its own internal analytics function, but it didn't have any platforms that managed acquisition data. So we built a system called Olive, which is our analytical data mart. That was built within 6 weeks of starting the engagement with Sky. We started to load it up with the acquisition data. I had 2.5 people, or 2 people and a part-timer, designing campaigns for Sky. And I'll whistle through this because there's quite a few builds, but the first thing we had to do was obviously get a list of Sky's customers onto that database, because otherwise when we were marketing new customers, we'd be contacting existing customers. So we had to have that list, but we quickly saw, at this time as an outside services organisation, that there were things we could do with customer data that Sky weren't doing. So we quickly got a reputation for helping Sky deliver analytics quite fast, and within about 6 months I found myself being the acting head of analytics at Sky, running what was the acquisition and customer marketing functions together. We helped Sky develop an understanding of customer value, which they didn't have before, and I'll reuse this later in the presentation. But at a Turing breakfast a few weeks ago, I heard one of the organisers stand up and say that one of the differences between universities and business is that universities has departments and business has problems. But when you dig into the business has departments as well. So Sky had an acquisition marketing department that was tasked with getting as many customers through the door at whatever cost, and a customer retention or marketing function that was trying to stop them leaving or stop them, make them pay the bills. And at the time within Sky, they were competing teams, competing KPIs. So we helped those things gel using this concept of customer value, and we brought that together into what was known at the time as the customer growth team. Around about 2007, Experian, which was one of the major competitors in the marketplace for Clarity Blue, bought Clarity Blue, so we became Experian Integrated Marketing, still doing the same work for Sky. My team had grown by this stage to about 20, of which about 15 were aligned with Sky, and we bolted another 20 from Experian, people doing Experian type stuff up in Nottingham in the main. The services and the growth of analytics at Sky during that time didn't change very much, except that the business areas of advertising and content, which I'll talk a lot more about later on, started to become aware of what the customer team were doing with data and started to identify some of the opportunities. There's a big gap here between 2007 and 2010 because I was in a bunker somewhere in Westminster looking at some very interesting data. So I'm not being I'm not ignoring the progression that happened in that time because I don't know about it, but I can hand on heart saying there wasn't that much. We'd effectively been folded into Experian, and as a fleet of fit organisation, we became more like the mothership, and the services within and for Sky did mature, but there were no real transformational changes.
We're just waiting for you to come back.
Sure, yeah. So I came back and all this stuff happened. So in July 2010, Sky IQ was formed, and this was effectively a joint venture between Experian and Sky, which then became a wholly owned department within Sky. Sky IQ still had clients outside of Sky, but the bulk of its attention and funding and growth was in Sky. One of my first, I'll go in every square box here we talk about in more detail later on, but my first job when I came back was effectively to fold all of the analytical teams that were still dispersed around Sky into one function. What was the EIM team came in, the legacy analytics team came in, 2 offline or analytics teams came in, reporting teams came in, and we effectively grew from about 80 people to about 200 people overnight as all the analytic and reporting teams within Sky were folded into one department within Sky IQ. we were still perceived very much as a cost-based organisation. You know, you've got all those heads, what are they doing, how much are they costing? So we quickly came up with the value scorecard, which I'll talk about, which effectively is a way of measuring the value of everything we do so that we can prioritise work and then prove our worth back to the business. And you know, at a very high level, we for every pound that is spent by Sky on what was IQ and what's now IDS, we deliver £3 back to the business, and that's very useful when you get, you know, cost cutting or headcount cutting exercise going on, and it's also you know, a very simple way of getting the finance thumbprint, if you like, over everything you do. Now, around about this time, again 2010, we were moved, or organisationally we moved from the customer function into the financial function. So my manager, Tony Mooney, who's now the MD of IDS, went from working for the marketing director to the CFO. And that gave us effectively the remit to sit at the centre of that Venn diagram and share and dictate the use of best practice analytics around the organisation. Viewing data was my next challenge. So I joined in January 2011. By March 2011, I was running the viewing data programme. And we'll hear a lot more about that, but in essence, over the period of 9 months, we built up a representative panel across the UK of 500,000 homes, all returning every click of every button press on their remote and all the viewing fragments and all the metadata that goes with that into an analytical environment and a reporting environment. So that's the viewing data. And that, again, sat at the heart of this organisation. And as we'll see, for the first time, it allowed Sky to stitch these different worlds together. I've drawn it as a Venn diagram here, but on day one there were 3 separate spheres moving in their own directions. The concept of customer at Sky was, you know, somebody got a bill, they had a box in their living room, but the customer organisation didn't understand what the customer was watching on that box. Advertising was selling adverts, being measured through BARB, which is an industry body, but they didn't know what Sky customers were watching. And content was spending billions of pounds acquiring sports and entertainment and drama rights. But again, other than a content tracker, which was a survey that went out every week, they didn't know who watched what, who enjoyed what, and so on. So what the viewing data did, and still does today, is sit at the heart of that organisation and allow all those things that I said couldn't happen before to happen. So the customer teams now know the value of customers, they also know the viewing of customers, and they can relate those, etc. And then finally, just 2 real points to make. The first is that whilst within Sky IQ we had those 3 parts of the Venn diagram, there were still teams elsewhere in Sky, and I put them in dotted circles here, that weren't within Sky IQ but were tasked independently for delivering insight. So in advertising we had the media research team, content research and strategy and insight, and primary research was probably the only central function that served all 3 spheres, but it again was outside of IQ. So we had lots of multiple tasking, you know, different, you know the issues yourselves. If you get different sources of data, it's the same is true if you get different sources of insight. You know, one person asks 4 and then you get 5 answers and so on. So along came IDS, which was in July 2015, where the remaining insight functions, if you like, within Sky were folded into insight and decision science. And our remit grew, not just for the IQ part, you'll see from the subheading there, you know, the building the central brain, what do we know about the business, what do we know what's happening. Our remit grew into what we call decision science, which is, well, how do we take what we know and apply it in our customer interactions, which is why I've used EQ there. We've got to get away from, you know, being the big brain that can answer any question to actually, what happens if we use this and how do we understand our customers' reactions and behaviours, much more of a softer understanding of how that intelligence might be applied. And again, I'll talk about some of these things, but this is largely in content and customer land, acronyms for funky models and some other things you might expect, but segmentation, modelling, etc. Okay, so not as many builds on the rest of the slides, you'll be pleased to hear. So organisationally, very quickly, how are we aligned? So all of those bodies I talked about sit in either a vertical or business partnership team, which are the ones that run across the top. So these are effectively account teams that face off to part of Sky and are responsible for understanding the requirements, the strategy, the insight needs, the decisioning needs of that part of the organisation. For example, Christina faces off to trading, so customer numbers, acquisition, retention, customer growth, price rises, several layers you can think about. Most of these teams are quite thin, kind of 5 to 15 people, and they're, for those of you that worked in consulting, they're the account team understanding the needs of the stakeholder groups, and then they have skills themselves, obviously, to develop insight and drive strategy, but they also reach down into what we call the horizontals or the centres of excellence. So I run the analytics or the decision science horizontal. Chris runs operations and report, which includes reporting and data governance and so on. Stephen runs the primary research function, and then the technology estate is managed by Sky IT, but Oliver is effectively part of our leadership team, and the close coupling of the IT function with the rest of the business is very, very important. In my area, just very quickly, I've got about 120 analysts, which sounds like a lot. Roughly 60 of them are working on strategic projects, large econometric projects, data science, data governance, all the viewing data, panel management that we've talked about. Increasingly digital analytics, so Adobe estate and understanding what's happening online, and what we now call decision analytics, which is understanding customer journeys, trying to build out that big brain of what's going on, which I'll talk about more. So that's half of the team. The other half are partitioned, not equally, but across these vertical teams. So Christina has about 15 analysts that are there and are embedded into the trading team. Dara has 8 into the content team and so on. And the same is true of the other horizontals. There are some that perform a central function and some that are plumbed into the verticals. So I struggled for a while coming up with the title of this slide. I had everything from mouth-watering or to die for, but the data we've got is immense. This will be a common feature, and for those of you that are big data professionals, we've got big data, we've had it for years. We've got, and I won't read all the slides on here, but we've got, we know a lot, not quite as much as ONS would do around the UK households, but we know a lot. We've got, as you probably know, 10.4 million paying customers, and which means that what's that? 40% of the UK households are Sky customers. We've got another 6 million which have been Sky customers at some point in time, and we've got all of the history of all of their transactions. The viewing panel, as I said, stood up in 2012, so we've got lots of viewing data. Yes, we obviously work within European data retention directives and data controls, so stuff's obfuscated and archived and so on, but we've got a lot of information there. We've got all the model data that I talked about. Roots, as I said, we're in marketing, so uplift models, decay models, survival curves, product propensities, channel propensities, elasticity models, etc. We've obviously got all the stuff we need to operate the business. So within the reporting team, we run about 3,000 reports a week, known as the Priority 1 or the P1 reports that service the business. And also report Sky out into the city. So all of that reporting function is owned by IDS as well. We've got the research that I talked about, so it's primary and secondary. Increasingly, we're linking that up to other data. So we've got the viewing panel I mentioned, and we've got a massive ongoing survey which takes customers' perceptions and links it through to the actual behaviours, but also customers' competitor perceptions, Netflix, Amazon, BT, etc., and links that through to what they think of Netflix and how that relates to their actual behaviours. I've talked about the viewing data. So we began with the set-top box panel. Again, there's lots of stuff in here, so I'm trying not to dig in, but do make notes and grill me on any of it going forward. But we started with the set-top box panel. We've obviously got Sky Go, we've got viewing on apps and so on. All of that, obviously where the customer is identifiable, which goes for all the set-top boxes and all the Sky Go devices. Customer is identifiable, the assets, we've got a common view of assets across platforms, so we can tie all that together and we have what we call a total view of consumption. So not just what do you watch at home, but what do you watch on your mobile devices and so on. And then we've already got the interactions, which historically have been kind of call centres, but obviously increasingly on the web. Beyond that into live chat, helplines and so on. Key point, and these are, I'm told these are real Sky customers, is that it's all customer centric. So we've got some weird stuff in there like the weather, because the biggest driver of how much viewing there is in the UK at any moment, any day, is whether it's raining outside. Did the ice cream van show up, etc. If you leave that out of your econometric models, you might see a big dive in the day you announce your sports package, and it's not because they don't like your sports package, it's because the sun came out. So you've got to have it in there. Obviously, we can't tie the weather back to the individual. We're not quite an Internet of Things yet, but we can get it down to postcode sector level, I think, at a 4-hour interval. We've got Bounty, any mums or dads in the room. When you sign up for your free Bounty pack, Bounty collect that data, they sell it on, they tell Sky you're a new mum, and we can use that if we want to. We work with the Royal Mail to get house moves, with property developers for new houses, etc., etc. And it's all stitched in. The vast majority of it sits in Olive, as Olive has grown. I don't focus too much on architectures now, but we have Olive, which is a large Sky-based estate, the Midas, which is a large Netezza estate, and we also have a large Hadoop estate, and as most organisations are, we're managing the migration towards a data lake or big data centric solution. Okay, so enough about Sky to understand the size of what's going on. Any questions at that point? Hi, James.
When you bring all these assets together, do you typically bring them together at the point you acquire a particular data item, or do you keep them separate until the point at which you do the analytics?
It varies. So where we are today, they're all together, and it's grown largely. I talked about the value scorecard. So when we say, can we have X million pounds to build a viewing database, or another X million to upgrade the big Netezza box, it's very hard to do that. How do you justify the investment in a data warehouse? You don't. You say, well, if I've got every click of every view of a Champions League programme, then it would be worth this. So a lot of the data assets have grown organically through use cases and proof points. But some people talk about Steam, Liquid, Ice. Some people talk about R&D through to production. We kind of do that with the data as well. So we'll get it, we'll play with it, we'll decide. In the big data world now, we can keep it all, but we'll decide what we want to firm up and what we want to stitch into the overarching model. But everything I've talked about there, I could get an extract of within a day. It's all in the same logical environment on less than half a dozen boxes. Okay, so I'm going to move on to talk about examples of data science. Show of hands, is this the bit that everybody turned up for? And I've just okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm trying to keep this theme throughout. 3 boxes and colours to link it together as well. And what I'm going to do very quickly is to talk about 2 examples from each area. Advertising, simple, we've got Ad Smart and Advanced, and it's just a slide on each of those. Content, when I picked 2, I realised it's a different curve. If I only told you 2, then I was only telling you 2%. So I've put lots of stuff in there, and we can drill into any of them. And then customer, because customer marketing and analytics in customer is much better understood, I kind of split it into, yes, we do all the old world stuff, here's an example, but here's some of the new world stuff we're doing as well. But we'll go through those in turn. Just a bit of interaction. Anybody know where the subtitle here comes from? No? I'm disappointed, Tom. 1843. Lovelace. We have no pretensions and the analytical engine has no pretensions to originate anything. We do. Okay, so AdSmart. Hands up if you know what AdSmart is. Okay, for those that don't, it stands for targeted advertising. So some rough figures, it's about £1.4 billion of advertising revenue, money spent on adverts in the UK. So that's, Ford giving company X, that might be Sky, £20 million to have the first slot in the Champions League half-time break. That's money, it's advertising revenue. Sky on its platform has about 25 million adverts. You bunch them up, average of 4 to 5 adverts per advert break. But they're all broadcast, and up until AdSmart came along, they're all, everybody in the same, on watching the same channel at the same time gets the same adverts. There's no way of doing any targeting within the advert break. And that's obviously inefficient. It's all measured by BARB, which I won't spend too long on, but BARB is an industry standard panel, been around since about 1980. 5,100 homes in the UK that have devices to measure the viewing on the box using audio matching. About 2,000 of those homes are Sky homes, and the rest are not. So when you hear, 17 million people watch X Factor, it wasn't. It was 73 times the weight of that segment. So the viewing panel I talked about is 650,000 homes, a stratified sample where we measure the viewing. We have about another 2.5 million homes. These are all consented and all opted in, where we get the viewing data every other day, but we get all 2 days of viewing, so we've still got daily viewing. So around 3 million homes altogether, where more than 80% for the daily panel, which is the 625,000, it's more than 95%, but if you extend it to a broader base, on average around 80% of every click that happens on your set-top box comes through. Now the science bit, which is where the title of this presentation came from, it originally came from The Martian, with the guy in The Martian, Matt Damon, saying he needed the science to stuff on Mars. A guy from MediaTel picked that up when AdSmart was launched and said that Sky really are sciencing the out stuff. The science bit comes because that viewing data comes back as viewing fragments, so it's a start and an end time. We then obviously have to match that to the electronic program guide to understand what was watching at the time. But because, unlike the BARB homes, we don't have you pressing a button to say, I'm starting watching now, I'm stopping watching now, we work out algorithmically when people are leaving the room, when the box is going into standby, and so on. It's all been independently audited by our RSMB, and it gives us a very robust, very large sample that enables AdSmart. So AdSmart is targeted advertising for the TV. Technically, what's happened is on the box, we've done some profiling. So all of the 2,000 or so attributes we've got for every household in the UK, we've packaged some of those up and we send them out periodically to your card. So if you're a Sky customer with an AdSmart enabled box, your card will have a profile of your household on, very similar to the one that direct marketing companies have been used for years. We then, that's Jamie West, by the way, the MD of AdSmart. We then sell adverts, not just broadcast, buy ABC One males on a Friday afternoon, and we'll try and get them in front of that audience by putting on every box in the country. Just like direct marketing or some online marketing, we can sell audiences. So an audience in media terms is any combination of those 500 plus ad segments that are loaded to the box. So age, gender, profile, all the usual ones, plus reading habits, affluence, social demographic profile, generally anything you would buy from Experian or third party. We also, in the second release of AdSmart, we allowed the advertisers to give us their own segments. We call them custom segments, but companies like Tesco will have their own customer segmentation. So why should they try and morph their understanding of customers into our data? Why don't they just give it to us and we'll put it on their boxes? So we can do very complex targeted advertising. So the segments go down to the box. The campaigns, rather than sitting on a campaign server for DM, are loaded into the system, and all the adverts, or the copy, if you like, that could be used to support the campaigns is copied down onto the box as well, to a partition of the hard drive. And then you sit there watching TV, the advert break comes on, it knows who you are, it knows what time of day it is, you know what campaigns it's trying to get in front of you. And in the broadcast channel itself, you get what's called a hint code, which is you can sell something now. It's going through the stream. So the box says, okay, I can sell something. What have I got to sell? Who's in front of the box at this time of day? And it picks from a carousel the relevant advert and it splices in, frame perfect. So you, even downstairs and upstairs, let alone the guy next door, can be watching the same channel at the same time of day and be seeing different adverts. Okay. Now, all of the spot data or the advert data, including all the what we call ad smart impressions, are captured by the box and they're sent back just like the viewing fragments are. So rather than saying this guy was watching 2 hours of BBC, we can get adverts on BBC, 2 hours of ITV, we know when all the advert breaks are, we know what linear adverts went out, the normal ones, we know what ad smart impressions went out, we know whether people fast forwarded through them or rewound and watched them again. And all of that comes back in to this viewing data. That's one of the Netezza boxes. We obviously do a lot of insight, but there's obviously a billing side of it as well. So which adverts went out, which adverts got seen, what price should we charge the companies and so on. So that's what generated the title that gave me the inspiration for my title, but that's an example of where, we didn't have a data science team when we did this. It's some simple maths. I think I wrote the capping, what we call the capping and scaling algorithms one November weekend in 2011. It's now obviously an industry sitting on top of that, but that's just an example of what you can do when you bring science and business needs together. The second one is more recent, so this was advanced. You see a bit of a theme going on with the titles here. This was builds on some of the stuff we've got with AdSmart. So imagine we've got all that stuff I've just talked about, but we can do it cross-platform, so not just on your set-top box, but using DMP, or data management platform, we can link you as an entity to your cookie, to where you might appear in an online advertising world. Again, I won't go too deep, but there are trading systems that exist online, DSPs, which can take audiences or segment profiles and again, campaign inventory and bring the two together. So when you log on to Hotmail and it says, do you want to go camping? It's because you've expressed, or someone using that computer has expressed some interest in camping before. So what Advanced does very quickly is it brings that together. So it's AdSmart technology on the set-top box, but it allows you to deploy campaigns that are joined up from your set-top box to your presence in the online world. And just like most advanced forms of campaigning, the left arm has to know what the right arm is doing. So you can get what you call sequential and consequential advertising, where you might say, we'll show them the advert for the Porsche 5 times on the set-top box, but then don't show it anymore. AdSmart allows that. So you get what's called, that's frequency, let them see it 5 times. I want everybody to see this 5 times. You get what's called reach, which is how many unique devices or households have seen it. You also get recency. Don't show it, if you've shown it once, don't show it again for 2 days. So all of that happens, but now you can do it either in parallel, set-top box, so that they saw it on the TV, quick, show them something tomorrow or next time they're online, or sequentially, show them 5 times on the set-top box. Once they've done that, don't bother on the set-top box again, show them the same ad online, or any permutation of that. So you can effectively get stuff happening. The spot is just a name for the advert slot, happening on the set-top box, and then various things happening platform for us is Sky, so that means on the Sky platform or elsewhere. So it's not just people watching on Sky Go. So it could be your Hotmail account or an app that you've downloaded anywhere where online ads are traded. So as well as there being £1.4 billion spent on TV, these are figures about 3 years old, there's another £1.4 billion spent on online advertising. And Advance for Sky puts something out there that's not available anywhere else in the market. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, I'm going to quickly move on to content. And there is a lot to, I'll stop saying there's a lot to cover. There's a lot to cover. One of the things that helps people that are new to content, particularly who haven't worked in the media industry, so I say honey, you say G. I say content, and you think of, I watched a movie last night. Okay, but if you think that to Sky that content is like a product on a shelf in a supermarket, it's got to get there. We've got to buy it, we've got to make it, we've got to do a deal to get it. We've got to decide, just like the cornflakes in the shop, we've got to decide what shelf to put it on. We've got the temporal dimensions, so we have to decide what channel to put it on, what time of day, what's happening on all, in all the other supermarkets, what's on ITV at the same time.
Can I ask if it's commercially sensitive, that's fine. What's the balance of revenue between subscription revenue and advertising revenue?
I think these are published figures.
I mean, I guess is it like half and half, or one is
No,
dominating the other?
No, it's about 10 to 1 subscription versus advertising, but
Subscription is the dominant one.
yeah,
Okay.
but the profit margins are very different.
Ah, okay. If I switch to profit,
It's different. It's not 10 to 1, and it's not 1 to 10, but it's
okay.
advertising, because the machinery's there, we've just got to sell the adverts and get them through the box.
Yeah. The reason I ask is, your model of the product's the program and the customer is me. To some extent, the product is me, and the customer is the advertiser.
Yeah.
So I just want to get this sort of straight.
Yeah,
in my head.
and this is, we'll see as we come on to the strategy side, these worlds existed before, so the advertising world is interested in eyeballs. They want to know where you're going to be watching so they can sell you stuff. And they need a Barb-style understanding of who you are, so 28 different demographics or demos to describe you. The content world, not so bothered about your eyeballs, they're just really, they get money from you having a box and subscribing to sports. So until we came along and allowed them to measure content, they didn't really know or were, and therefore didn't care how much content you watched. But did you have your sports package and so on? Now there's obviously interesting things going on because we can tell with the content guys what eyeballs are watching what program, so they've got a much more scientific way of understanding where to put the assets. And then obviously, as I've said with AdSmart, a much richer way of doing that for adverts as well. So when you come to things like Sky's brand in the marketplace, we don't want to be out there. I can't remember the stats, but it's something like there's governance around how many adverts you show and obviously what types of adverts you show. But Sky is at the very low end of how many adverts are shown in VOD, and for some areas of VOD, video on demand, we don't show adverts at all. So the content guys are great. Everybody loves our content because there's no adverts, and the advert guys are, yeah, but I'm not monetizing the eyeballs. So there is contention there.
Am I right to keep asking questions? Sorry.
Certainly, yeah.
So if I think from an advertiser perspective, like it feels like what you've done for me is, instead of selling me probably 1 million impressions of my ad, you've sold me 20,000 to a very specific demographic.
Yeah.
So I'm happy with that because I feel like
Yeah.
the ad is much more targeted to people who will be responsive, and I can probably pay less and get a bigger return. But the thing that I miss, I think, which advertisers always miss, is the next bit where that person then goes and buys my product. And so when you sort of talked about science,
Yeah.
in my head I was thinking, what we're going to do is a randomized controlled trial of which adverts we show to which people, and then the advertisers can track results. Is that?
I'll touch on two things which are close to that. One is somewhere we didn't get to. The door's not closed, but that's working with dunnhumby, for example. So dunnhumby have something like 16 million registered club card users. We've got 10 million customers, and if you overlap, the overlap is impressive. But we couldn't get to a point of doing a deal. We did some proof of concepts. I mentioned earlier on that Sky IQ had relationships with external parties. So we run the insight teams for Ladbrokes, News International, and a few others. We've got work that's in the public domain with Homebase, Argos, and so on. And we do help them get more out of their advertising spend by matching their attributes, but also their customer bases. I won't say which one, but for one of them, they ran a campaign of the adverts on the TV over the weekend while they were having in-store promotions. And we found 16,000 customers, which is three and a bit times the size of Barb, but this is their identified customers watching their adverts, who watched what, and then they had the in-store information. So that closed loop, wouldn't it be great if we saw the advert and then we knew what they purchased and then close that loop? We're doing for select customers, but we're not yet doing it en masse.
People looking to kind of do the targeted adverts, are they very specific in terms of the subgroups they're looking for? So I saw you had voting intentions and political attitudes. Do you get people specifically requesting certain political groups or attitudes to in terms of the content or in the marketing?
Not yet, and nothing to do with car insurance or Facebook profiles either, for those that are interested. So some of it is, and again, if you had the AdSmart salesman here, he'd tell you that we are opening up advertising on TV to people that haven't been able to do it before. So why would Porsche or Lamborghini advertise to everybody in the UK? Because not everybody's going to buy it, but also a lot of local advertising, Bob's Corner Shop, the kind of thing you used to see in the cinema. I don't get time to go anymore. Then the Curry House over the road. You can now do that on TV and constrain it to a postcode region at a reasonable price. Some of the you might have seen on Sky News around the polling. They didn't have the IQ logo on it, but there was a table which talked about Sky data tells us about responses to online polls. We do that, so we work with Sky News and Sky Sports and so on. So that kind of who's watching what, who switches between channels, and what's their political affiliations is part of their data landscape. So just quickly on the retail energy, I hope you get the concept. You've got assets, you've got products, you've got to understand how to do it. We've got things like audience forecasting. So we've got a new program, let's call it Fortitude. Where do we put it on the schedule? We've got to have some idea of competitor schedules. We've got all the rights deals and so on to worry about. Market basket analysis, what do people watch together? Borrowed from retail. Recommendations I won't dwell on, because lots of people talk about recommendation strategy. If you watch this, what else are you likely to watch, and so on. Share of wallet, how much content does the average customer person watch? Does it matter if they watch 4.2 hours of Sky TV in the UK, but they're also watching Netflix and Amazon and off-platform stuff? Does that matter, or does just protecting our 4 hours matter? I'll talk about rights and risk there. You're probably aware of Premier League rights, Championship League rights. Again, given our massive experience in the, I didn't use the word big data, but it's bigger than big data. It's massive experience in the customer land. Which customers are valuable to us, which ones are risky, which ones are interacting with us, etc. We've got all that, as many segmentations as you like of that. Imagine if you could marry that up with obviously anonymized and aggregated viewing behaviours. And then somebody said, how much should we invest in these rights, be they gold or Champions League? We can science the stuff to understand what is the risk and the attitude of the people that will be affected by changes in schedules. Okay, second and final slide on content. Did the old rainbow thing here, which I thought was good. I was looking for in PowerPoint, I haven't got infrared, but I've made a guess at here. So these are just other terms. I was just going to step through them. The bit about the sub-heading here is that you think you've seen everything, and then someone asks you to something else. So you get a different lens or a different lamp out, and patterns appear, colours appear that you didn't see before because you didn't look for them. So content metadata is very important. So this is imagine you're watching TV, you click the information button, you get a little synopsis, you might get a few actors, you can now search by actor or genre and so on, so that comes as standard. There's a lot of work we've had to do, as I'm sure every other broadcast has, in terms of tidying that up and making it available in a robust way. But there's a lot more you can do. So we work with a company called LingoSpot, recently bought out by Pixel, where they can effectively got your robots or programs that can watch a movie and then give you a very detailed synopsis of whether it was dark comedy or whether it was light and so on. We're doing a company called Loop AI from the States to do deep learning, again looking at Rotten Tomato reviews and building semantic maps. So you might see, in your normal metadata you might see bad, but in the learned description of the movie, bad could be bad as in wicked, or bad as in bad, and wicked could be wicked as in wicked, or wicked as in bad. And it's language agnostic because it doesn't know the language, so you haven't got to preload your text mining algorithm with some kind of lexicon that's always out of date. You just give it the symbols and the system learns. So that's happening. Forecasting, I've talked about that, but you imagine you've got to predict every 15-minute segment of every day on every channel for the next 5 years. We've got algorithms that do that, and aren't too far off. Series stacking, so this is getting some more of the use cases, but we've gone from having all these content that we can put on the shelves, on all the channels, but we've got the VOD content, video on demand, we've got the box sets, we've got Sky Store. We've got the opportunity, when you watch episode 1 now, to preload episode 2. We could put it all up on demand and then just put episode 1 on linear and then watch you as you go and watch the others. Or do we put it up for a week and then have a gap, like a teaser, and then we show you the linear, etc. All these permutations. In the old, to stretch the retail analogy a bit, in the old days, you turned up at with a basket and we knew what was in your basket. Now we can influence, the order of which you put things in the basket, what you see as you walk down every aisle. It's a very rich environment. We've got the UI. How do we change what's on the screen to lead you around your navigation toward content and so on? Commissioning, I won't dwell on too much. That's around when we get content, we've got to get the product to put on the shelves. How do we get it? We can make it ourselves. That's the commissioning bit. We commission content to be made. We can acquire it. We can buy it, or we can do partnerships and so on. End of series. So, Game of Thrones comes out, or something that's got a shorter lifetime. Finished. You've got to do an end of series report. How do you develop KPIs around what mattered? Was it a number of people? How often? Whether they fast forwarded through adverts? These are all questions we're being asked. Sports interest group is interesting because if you're a Sky customer, this work has probably influenced the structure of your EPG. I'm sure you've never had that said to you before. If you think of sports, Sky Sports 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this work has looked at what sports people consume together, and then put those sports together within channels, so that if you like cricket and rugby, you haven't got to buy two things from Sky because we put them together in the same channel. So it's where we're using our understanding of how people consume content to make the propositions for the customer more appealing. I put recommendation strategy here, and I didn't, any Netflix, not customers, there's probably a few, any people work for or with Netflix, probably a few on the system, so thank you for that. So we talk a lot, we compared a lot in terms of Netflix. One of the things that we differentiate ourselves from with Netflix or ITV or any other broadcaster is that we have customers, they have viewers. Okay, so I can, in my customer-centric world, I know from my people all those other things. ITV might know what you viewed, so that even if they had the richness of our viewing data, but they wouldn't know the rest of it. The other thing on recommendations is that the recommendation is often the first step of knowing what somebody wants to watch. And as I talk about a bit later on, it's more the application of the science that matters. So just to throw a few simple things out, if I looked at Tom's viewing, the most likely program he's going to watch is EastEnders because he watches it all the time. So should I advertise EastEnders to him, or no, he's already watching it all the time? It's like, walk into a supermarket, people buy bread, every day they go and they buy a loaf of bread. Do you offer them another loaf of bread? Well, no, because they only consume one loaf. So there's a difference between what the algorithm tell and what matters. You've then got the strategy. So what do we want to do with Tom? Do we want him to watch Brookside or another soap, show my age now? Do we want to grow his repertoire, get him off of soaps onto movies because they're stickier, they deliver more value to the business? From a customer land, is Tom a new customer? Do we want to introduce him to lots of Sky features to grow him early on, and then he's likely to do more as he goes on? Has he not paid his bills? Should we bother giving him a recommendation at all, or should we actually actively encourage him to watch products that are less sticky so that he gets fed up with watching Sky and goes to the BBC? So that's recommendation strategy. It's not, my Netflix algorithm is better than yours. It's, let's take the science, get an algorithm that's in the top decile of performance, but then link it into the organisation. Content engagement value is important. That's about those two spheres of customer and content coming together. Does it matter if customers watch more over time? Do they buy more? Do they stay with us longer, etc.? And we've done that work, and I'm not going to tell you the answers, but we've done that work looking at movies and entertainment and so on. And then I've talked about content acquisition. That's, again, some of the things that happen in Sky. Obviously, working for Sky, if you've ever worked in a large organisation, you've probably done what I've done, which is gone to the people portal or the phone list and tried to look at some weird names or weird job names. It's not that I'm not busy, but so there's somebody that works for Sky called Mr. Baby and a Mrs. Baby. I don't know if they're going to get together and have more babies. You've got everything from lead grip to dog handler to beautician. So there's some strange things going on in Sky. One of the things that even some of the high-end people that really understand the content do to understand whether or not we want to bring it on our platform is they sit and watch it. So there's times in the year where people will spend 5 days locked in a room watching content. Now, obviously, there's only so much of they can do, so many hours in the day. So what about all the other content? How do we judge that? Well, we don't, or we can't. But with some of the stuff we talked about in terms of content metadata, if we could, lingo spot the content and get the guys that are doing their tick sheets for the things, their stuff they're watching, to work out what the golden questions are or what the discriminatory factors are for good, bad, or ugly content, and we can codify that and then run it over the algorithms for the rest of the content, then we're analysing more scientifically the acquisition piece. So that's in that piece as well. Okay, so that's the end of the content. Question at the back there. Hey. So through a couple of angles. So we do a lot of market research. I mentioned Stephen's team early on. So we do focus groups. We do ethnographic studies, a bit like Googlebox, where we go and sit in the home and we watch the people, not what non-Sky customers watch. So we do it through a survey. We also do it analytically through heat maps. So looking at if you were able to tessellate the type of stuff we've got and the type of people that watch the type of stuff we've got, you'll see that some stuff is never watched. Some people never watch anything, but over time there are people that watch certain types of content, and when that content's not there, they don't watch anything. So would they watch something if it was there? That happens. I'll come on to the challenge of visualising that in a moment. So just a couple of slides on customer, and then I'll move on to some of the things that beyond the data that I think are useful. So this slide's at least 5, maybe 8 years old. It's a typical cycle that most marketing analytical services organisations will show you to show that they really do closed-loop analytics. So I won't dwell on it too much, but we, IDS as a function, do all of this. So there's all the customer data we talked about. At a high level, you can think about customer marketing as get, keep, grow. How do we get the right customers? The ones that are going to pay the bills, the ones that are going to watch our content, the ones going to promote our content. So we've got to get them. We've got to keep them at the tail end. We have a huge churn spike like most subscription-based organisations do between 12 and 15 months when people have done their 12-month contract and they reevaluate. Other spikes at the end of offer where you get 6 months half price on movies and then you move off and you look for other offers. So we've got, if I just focus on those 3 areas to simplify it, at acquisition side, we've got models to understand customer risk. We call it the customer quality measure. So before they're a customer, we don't know anything about them, but we do know where they live. We know where you live, we know the profile, socio-demographic profile. We don't ask for upfront payments, but we've got a very good track record of making sure that the offer we give to you at acquisition matches your ability to pay, which is good for the consumer because they then don't take on things they can't afford. We've got analysis of the headroom, so we've got all our customer segmentation, then we've got prospect segmentations, people that are not yet customers or people that haven't been customers. You saw some of it on the earlier slides. We've got segmentations of what we call simple segments, kind of stabilise, grow. How do you bucket people up into where they are in their life stage with us? And most of those segmentations are hierarchical, so you can go down from the big segment into the 8 segments that make that one up. The keep side is around, talk about customer retention. So a lot of customers contact Sky to try and leave Sky. We call that a turnaround event. We try to save them and then put them into win back. But as you can imagine, servicing those requests is very costly, just having people answering the phone or having to give away offers to retain people. So there's a lot of focus on what most people would know as churn modelling, but also the price elasticity, how much could we save them on, channel preferences, should we drive them to the online channel to get better service and so on. In the grow area, we've got lots of models understanding what we call the engagement, so how do people interact with our products, how the product, so the product models like a product for Sky is Sky Sports, Sky Movies, Sky Go, how are those products performing over time and how do we bring all of that information together. So we've got, we get the data, we do all of that analysis. I've got a better picture later on, so I won't dwell too much on that. But then ultimately it results in us doing something with the customer, sending them either responding to an inbound activity, someone calling up or going onto the website, and we do a lot of outbound activity, and all of that is captured, who we contacted, who's contacted us, what the intent, the outcome of that was, and it's used to understand the performance of campaigns, the performance of call centre agents. 16,000 call centre agents all getting paid based on their behaviour. All of that is in this world as well. And obviously there's a loop there, so we'll come back to a much better loop later on, but this relatively old marketing loop allows us to close the dots on that. I'm conscious I'm an hour in. I'm about 70% of the way through. Are we okay with pace and content? Okay. So so if that's old marketing, I've called it good old-fashioned marketing science. I think Aaron Sloman at the University of Sussex, which is where I first met Tom, talked about good old-fashioned AI, and I use that, good old-fashioned machine learning. It's good and it's old, but it still works. Like the old cars and the old radios. We're still doing this, and we've been doing it using SAS or SPSS or Excel for years, and it works. So what are we doing that's transformational and different in the marketing space? And this is really the best way of describing it is in the migration from early on. I talked about IQ and EQ. Is everybody familiar with what IQ is? I assume you've probably all got your scores in your pockets. EQ is emotional intelligence from Dan Goleman, and it's around the difference between your intellect and your ability to perform socially. And not surprisingly, that one's more important if you want to get on in life and in business. It did. Let's time up. Oh. Okay. So I talked about Sky IQ, and I talked about IQ being the big brain, and we talk about this a lot in our organisation analysis. So we effectively got all that data, we've got insight we derive from the data, and that's what Sky IQ was for a number of years, effectively sitting there as an external party that had been brought into Sky, and it knew everything, and it knew everything, yeah? And that was good because we knew everything, but it's bad because we knew everything. Nobody else knew it. So you'll see a few of the quotes flying around. One of the quotes I carry with me, which again is from Introductory to Hospers, I think, Introduction to Philosophy. The actions of fools are just as necessary as those of the most prudent individuals, which is very important to teach your analysts that think they know everything when they meet the marketers who have got to interact and design their campaigns. And that can go from, why won't they use my neural network? Who cares? What it says, it works. Right through to, why do they want to sell pink envelopes over blue envelopes? So that's the IQ bit. When we became insight and decision science, we obviously retained the insight, but our shift organisationally was to focus more on the decision science. How do you take that great big brain and plumb it into the limbs of the organisation so that every touch you make with a customer has your intelligence plumbed into it? And that could be a recommendation on a website, it could be a call centre script, it could be a targeted advertising on a TV box, etc. So the decisioning strategy that you would have seen earlier on the timeline was born soon after IDS was born, and it's about tool sets and operating models to get a joined up customer strategy driving the brain. It's great having a big brain, but if you've got 10 voices in your head telling you what to do with it, it doesn't feel too good. Right through to being able to operate, and then as you'll see, the importance of this feedback loop. We use multiple terms to describe these to different people. We talk about decision support as decisions for the business. So you remember some of the capability there, so the 3,000 reports that go out every week, the 18 people I've got doing econometrics, some of the survival modelling, etc. They're all about strategy. What do I do? Where should I put my media spend? Should I do this campaign or not? Based on what I know about investment, how investment has worked in the past. Decision management, sometimes called decision execution, is getting that out to the customer. So we also talk about these being the big decisions, and these are lots of little decisions or marginal gains if you're a cycling fan. A big part of IDS's focus at the moment is on building the machinery for this, which we've built and we've proven now, and then rolling it out so that we can plumb that brain into the rest of the business. So in terms of tool sets, this is good old, I mentioned Sybase, but I haven't got very techie. This is good old fashioned analytics. A few people doing R, using Spark, a lot of people using back to SAS now from SPSS, Excel, offline analytics. This is the Adobe estate. So everything from the DMP, which I talked about for the audience profiling online, through to Adobe Analytics, Interaction Manager, Campaign Manager, etc. That's Adobe suite. The bit in the middle, we're working with SAS with a product called SAS Real-Time Decision Manager, RTDM, which is effectively a tool set that once you've designed your customer journey, so customer is going to click on this button, with the downgrade button on the website, there's a web service sitting behind it that recognises that customer has hit the button. It goes off and gets the AOP, the profile of the customer, it returns it, and that determines what happens next on the web page. And we have the services, Kafka and other streaming processes to understand what's happening on the web page, so we can build up a session profile as well. So if your profile says you're into movies, but you spent the last half hour looking at sports, what should your recommendation be? And it's trading off those strategic decisions from the in-channel understanding. So that's customer. And the stop button stops it things apparently. Starts it again. Okay. So I've gone again. I toyed with the idea here, but what I'm going to do now is just talk 3 or 4 things that we do over and above the analytics to deliver the value of analytics into the business. So I've talked about the application of data science. Back at BT 15 years ago, I was talking about from analytics to action. Let's do the analytics, but what are we going to do with it? So I'm going to talk about 4 things. Second part of Lady Lovelace's quote there in the, it knows only to do how we order it to perform. So what can we do with this analytics? Raising the bar, so this is where we do all the analytics, but how do we get better at doing the analytics over time? A bit about corporate knowledge, so anyone that's done knowledge management will know that most organisations are chaotic, they don't know what they know, so how do you get from there, from a chaotic organisation to a knowing organisation through to a learning organisation? A bit about corporate strategy, some of which I've covered already, and a bit about leadership, because as well as rolling my sleeves up and building a few genetic algorithms when I get time, I've still got to manage 120 people. So how do you, in an environment where they're not all academically minded, they're not given interesting stuff to do all the time, how do you keep them motivated? And in that area, I'll focus on the importance of innovation. Okay, so I think there's quite a few builds on this, but I talked earlier about universities being departments and industry having business problems, and I said that the business itself is often siloed. So as well as having those verticals, the trading team, the product team, all the voices in your head telling you what to do with the customer, sell them more Sky Go, or stop them from leaving, or sell them more, or charge them more. That's all that's going on. If you can collapse that down into a consolidated customer strategy, somebody's knocked on the door, what do we say to them? Have they paid their bill? Do we promote a program? Do we show them an advert? Once we've done that, we then drop from the silos into the strata. Well, I need a report, I need a piece of analysis, I need some research. Well, you don't. You've got a problem. And that problem might be best served by a report or analytics. But so what we came up with a little slogan, which I'm not going to dwell on. But within the business, we have some functions. But what we're probably about 80% of the way through is shifting. So the teams have to exist. Your organisational breakdown structure is there. There is a reporting team, there is an insight team, there is an econometric team, there's a decisioning team, etc. But I use this Gartner breakdown of describe, diagnose, predict and prescribe as a way of getting away from who we are to what we do. And very quickly, I modify it in two ways. One is I add measure to the start. So there's no point in describing anything unless you've got your proper measurement. What is the value of a customer? How many churn attempts have they had? How many customers have we got? In a chaotic organisation, you can ask that to 5 different functions or 5 people in the same function, and you'll get different answers. So there's a big part of having measurement, data governance, data dictionaries, etc. I'll go through those. And I also add this act and learn, coming back to there's no point in developing insight unless you're going to do something with it. There's no point in doing something with it unless you're going to learn from it. So we talk a lot about measurement. We've got what we call a self-service cube estate, which is good. Would have been even worse if I'd been on the orange juice rather than the water. Let's talk about base profiling. We've got a base profiling cube, a cube, Microsoft OLAP thing. It's got hundreds of variables in it. 6 years ago, we had 85 different reports serving the same function. So we went through the building of these cubes, and there's a number of them, to throw away a lot of all the ad hoc reports and put it in a managed self-service environment. That means it's consistent. All the reports say the same thing because they're drawn from the same source. It also means we can commoditize data. So on average, again, I won't give you the figure, but each one of these cubes we build saves Sky the cost of having X.Y employees in the business, because we don't need people to build the reports or interpret them. They can self-serve. So there's a huge cost saving associated with building that estate. And it also gets us one step towards this being this knowing organisation, because there's only one place you go. You go to that cube, it's got all the numbers in it, and you can trust them. Describe is, again, this is getting into the Gartner bit in the middle. Describe is, I'll do this very quickly. So this is what's going on. This is why is it going on. Just let the builds go there. This is what's going to happen next. What are we going to do about it? And let's do it and learn from it. So that very quick run through there was a big step forward for us, because historically the reporting team would just describe something. Well, they wouldn't actually. They'd give you a report, so they're giving you a set of numbers. They don't tell you what the numbers mean. The report's then given to the business, and the business make up their own story of what the numbers tell them. the business being non-IDS, they then see things they don't like or don't understand, so they come into the analytics team and say, okay, why is this trend happening, which is a diagnosis thing, but the analytics team weren't joined up with the reporting team, so they say, why is what thing happening? Where do you get those numbers from? Bob next door gave me, and they had different systems. Not now, but so these guys would go off to their business objects reports. These guys couldn't replicate those numbers in a month of Sundays because they were using SQL against a Sybase environment that had a number of transformations. So we've overcome that now, and now the question comes in, and we build from what we know, and then we develop it onwards. This is more in the decisioning space. So everybody, for years I've said we've had these predictive models. We can tell you how many people are going to churn, who's most likely to churn, and all that stuff. This is, I couldn't find a picture of it, but this is more strategy prediction. If we bid X for these rights, it will affect these customers. So not telling the customer what to do, but predicting, so the stakeholders what to do, but using science to drive an understanding of the implications, scenario planning, for more enhanced forecasting and so on. This is working more closely with the business because we don't, IDS don't own any of the deployment channels. We design the inputs into the web page, but we don't run the web page. And then crucially making sure, kind of in the design of experiments here, that what we do can be measured at the end of it. So we know what worked and what didn't work, and then we can feed that back into the learnings. So that's, I've called it raising the bar. That's the first of 4 things I'll talk about, which isn't organisational science, business science. It's not data science, but it's very, very important. The second one I've covered some of. So this is how things that we've done to drive Sky from being a chaotic organisation to a knowing organisation, and we're on the cusp of being a learning organisation. So we launched something called the Insight Anytime portal, which is a SharePoint site, getting away from it, and we employed knowledge curators, ex-journalists. It started with wouldn't it be great if everything that happened in Sky could fit on the front page of or we get it all on one page? Well, you can't do that. Well, we do it with the Times every day. Front page of the Times tells you what's going on in the world. Why can't we do that, what's going on in Sky? So we developed this system, and all of that, all of the insight we do, all the people developing insight, reporting, analytics, every piece of work they do, as well as contributing to the value scorecard, how much was it worth, also goes into a knowledge curation process. So if it's truly new, we get what we call a short, so we publicise it, we have in brief, we have deep dives. You effectively productise the insight so that we design it once and then we promote it. And then we've got Quiet News Week, we dig out some of the old stuff and tell it again because they didn't listen first time. But all of that's in place. Some of these numbers, over 3,000 members of staff, not all IDS people have access to that. Reach is what proportion of those people look at it at least once a week, so it's being used. Thousands of documents. You can click on your favourites, get automatic email alerts and so on. Just wondering what's going to appear there. I think it's the value scorecard, yeah. So this is the value scorecard I alluded to before. Again, all the stuff that flows through our knowledge estate is also codified. Anyone who's worked in business will understand the concept of a balanced scorecard, a picture that tells you how the company's doing. This is the same thing. We effectively measure and report on with finance approval the realisable value. So don't do that campaign again. It cost 30 grand last time. It didn't have any uplift. So if you don't do it, you'll save 30 grand. That counts as a financial uplift, even though we didn't do anything. We stopped people from doing anything. Through to, if you move your media spend across, off of radio onto TV, you'll save £2 million financial uplift. And then we also capture strategy and others as well. Okay, 2 more. So that was all about knowledge. This is more about the applying data. So I've touched on some of this, but this is, imagine you had all of that knowledge and you could do any algorithm and any analysis you wanted. Where does that hit the ground with the business? What do the business typically ask us? So how does that analysis or that science feed into the strategies? And I said I've covered a lot of this already. I did put the bottom one, a question, the last one on every one is an actual question we've been asked by the business. So I'll just focus on those because they're a bit more fun. So advertising we've talked about, content we've talked about, and customer. So what do I mean by gaming Barb? I haven't done much in gamification, but I talk about Barb measuring advertising performance, £1.4 billion traded on TV using Barb measurement. Barb effectively looks at the audience and talk about Barb minutes, so it carves all viewing up into minutes, and it takes the first second of the minute to say that this many people were watching that minute. Okay, but in reality they're not, they're watching the first second. Now if you look at the profile of an audience for an ad break, you get people watching the programme and then they all fast forward or switch channels, so the audience disappears and then it comes back at the end. So if you overlay the adverts to that profile, what you find is the first advert gets a lot of viewing because the first second people are still navigating away. The second advert doesn't always get as much, it's the people that have chosen to continue to watch. Now the ad breaks themselves, I said there's 25 million on the on Sky's platform. There's typically 4 or 5 in every ad break, and they're of different lengths. So you do get promotional buffers, you know, your BlackBerry or your Skoda or your Volvo or whatever. You get some promotional activity, which is Sky saying go and watch this tomorrow night on this other channel, but you then get what's normally known as commercials, so the adverts, and they, you know, there might be 30 minutes, 30 seconds, 60 seconds and so on, and they're this applies to all adverts. I've talked separately about AdSmart, but they're audience based. So if you're watching Top Gear, you're more likely to have an audience that is interested in cars or punch-ups. But you'll pay more per second for a short ad, because it's seen as being more impactful than a longer ad. So a 30, these are not real figures, but a 30-second ad might cost you £2 per second, and a 60-second ad might cost you £1 per second, yeah, or £1.50 or whatever. But if you do the math, as they say in the States, the first one gets more audience because of the audience profile. So you should put your 30-second break at the start because you'll get more money for it. So we did one analysis, so not representative, where we took an advert break, picked one at random in August 2012, and said if we played around with the order of those adverts, so it's the same viewing, same pence per minute being charged to the advertisers, but we moved them around, how much money would we get? And we found for that one advert we could make 40 grand more for Sky. It was a big advert, or big advert break, just by moving stuff around. Now if you think that there's 25 million ads, say 5 an advert, that's 5 million advert things, and we make 40 grand for each one of those 5 million, max. It's a lot of money just by changing the order of adverts. Next one, better to have loved than lost. So believe it or not, Sky has this thing called high passion content. It's not X-rated stuff, it's stuff that people feel passionately about watching. It started off with surveys, we've done work to model the relationship between what people say they value and what they actually value, and then built algorithms to predict whether content is high passion content using that lingo spot metadata that I talked about. Now we know that, so does it matter if you've seen one program that you really love and it's never on again? Do you like Sky more or less than if you'd seen 10 programs that you didn't really care about? Valid question, we get asked it. Does it matter if someone else is eating their lunch? This is a bit more convoluted, but if you think about the retail analogy, there is a share of wallet thing going on. If I spend all my money in Sainsbury's and that's all I spend, then Sainsbury's obviously care about if I go away. But if I spend only 40% of money in Sainsbury's and some in Wilko's and Lidl, it's important that I retain that 40%, but is it better to keep that 40% or find someone else that's going to give me 100%? So if you overlay that to viewing, simply put, does it matter how much of your overall viewing is on Sky? A, if you link it back to customer, if you're paying the bills, and B, if you're watching stuff that that you like. So wouldn't it be? We get asked all these questions all the time. I've left off Now TV because that's another part of the business. I've left off the service organisation, but these are the three big drivers of the insight we do. And obviously there is something that ties all those kinds of questions together: money. Yeah, and if we could get every question we asked and map it down like we try to in the value scorecard and say, okay, if we answer that question, it will cost us, 4 analysts for 5 days equals X, and it will deliver this money. Then, and we could do that for everything we were asked. Then we'd have a very simple way of prioritising all the stuff we do, but we don't. We get the content guy saying, "Surely, go on, tell us. Did someone like that program last night?" We've got all the data all over. It's going to take ages. Whereas in advertising, it's much more measurable. But we've obviously got to balance the needs of the business across the board. Okay, and then the final one, I talked about leadership, inspirational leadership. And I'm going to use, Tom will know why I was finishing the deck off yesterday, so I was a bit hurried on these last few slides. I'm going to use a couple of slides I used a while back to talk about innovation and the importance of it, just 2 slides, the importance of it in a large organisation where you, under all the pressure of the business, the fire hoses that get pointed at us on all these questions, how do you keep people fresh and motivated? So this is a framework for strategic innovation that comes from the paper I've referenced here, and it talks about different types of innovation. The point I'm trying to make in this slide is all of these types of innovation matter to your business, but they happen in different ways, and therefore you need to understand whether or not they're happening, which ones are important to you, and then how to drive the types of innovation that matter to you. So very quickly, strategic innovation is where you're trying to do something big. You need a managed process for that. We have one. We work with an external not-for-profit organisation called Cefriel from Italy, where we gather ideas, we develop them out in a divergent phase, we prioritise them, and then we converge and we pilot and so on. And that's very important if you want big transformational stuff. And this, just to be clear, this isn't doing innovation strategically, it's doing your strategy innovatively. The next one is incremental innovation. So you need to drive it, but it's smaller, so it's less value. So you don't need big workshops and external speakers. You need an idea scheme. How do we, everyone in the business, I had this great idea, nobody listened. So we've got white boxes where you can post them. We have on that Insight Anytime portal. I mean, that system's used for curating the knowledge. It's got a Spark-based workflow system, so people can request new jobs on there. It's got the idea scheme on there so that we can use the same infrastructure to harness that. So we have competitions, we have hack days to harness people's ideas. Sometimes they'll go up into here, sometimes they'll go in the bin, sometimes they'll deliver value. The serendipitous stuff, some people say, well, we get lucky, big breakthroughs. Most of the stuff that I've talked about, so the viewing panel, the Insight Anytime portal, the self-service cubes, have all been back here. We've driven them, had to drive them through the business. We have had a few lucky breaks as well. Some people say, you can't make your luck, but if you understand how it happened and you can recreate the environment, whether it's sitting in a bath with a crown in your hand or looking for benzene rings over a fire, it might not happen again in the same environment, but you can, if you can codify why it happened. For me, it's getting into Starbucks at least one afternoon a fortnight, just getting away from everything, and that's where my best work happens. So I've been told. And then you've got unplanned improvement. So this one is normally people having ideas about something else. The project managers will be the developers telling the project managers what to do. This is more around people having better ideas in their own environments. So I wish I could. And the worst thing for any department organisation is having a long backlog of things that could make your department better and a bunch of disgruntled employees that have never got the time to do anything. So how do you do that? So we do that through managing it through the line. So we guide our leaders and actively encourage them to put practices in place. So that could be similar techniques, idea schemes for the team, or hack days for the team. We call it inspirational leadership, but it's putting the onus on the leads in the team to take away the burden of the fire hoses that are coming at them. If you look back to, I don't know how many of you are in industry or in research, but if you're in industry, you probably, like I do, look back fondly at the time you were in academia, and you could have that time to think, and it's not always like that. So I'm going to get you showing you a show of hands. I'm going to get at least one of you to ask a question that isn't James. So the first bit is, what does innovation matter to you? This bit is around, well, how do you know how innovation happens, and what does it mean to your people? Can anybody tell me what they think those things are on the screen there? Yes, well done, thank you. I've had everything from balls to other things shouted at me, and not just on this slide. And that was the clue. So I'm going to use an analogy with litter. Picking up litter to help you understand that within your organisation or within your teams, you'll have, or even within yourself, you'll have different types of innovation going on. So I've got three examples of doing. This is the guy that does nothing. He sees it, he walks past it, or he doesn't even notice it because it's not, he's zoned out. You've got people that see it and don't like it. Oh, bloody litter's everywhere. You've seen the litter on the roads today. It's terrible. So they notice it. They're more aware, more cognizant, but they're more interested in grumbling about it. And then you've got people that do something about it, so they see it and they pick it up. Now, if you think of these scraps of litter as opportunities or innovation ideas in your organisation, you've got people that don't see them, people that don't agree with them, people that will pick something up and put it where they think it belongs. You've then got the thinkers, and we've got a few of these in Sky, I'm sure you have, who see the litter and think about what could be done with it. But that's all they do. They think. You get people that have great ideas. My first... as you'd imagine, I was surfing clip art to find these pictures. My first one of these that came up had a dress on, and I thought I couldn't put the only icon on the page of someone writing orders down as a lady, so I paint shopped out the dress, but still got the pen. So this is the person that says, I see the litter, something needs to be done about it, here's what needs to be done about it, list on the door. But they're proactively thinking about how the problem can be solved. And then this is the guy or lady that sees it and sees it as an opportunity. Imagine if we could harness all that litter. Recycling is the example here. So the point I'm making is, for innovation, there's all these types of people in your organisation today, in your team today. There's probably all these types of people in your head today, depending on what mood you're in, how late you were, how much your leg's hurting, all that kind of stuff. And a bit like time management or energy management, just by thinking about it, you can learn a lot about your team and about yourself. So I've just got a couple of examples of how we put that into practice at Sky. So if you know all this stuff's going on, how do you describe it? You need a language. Well, we do that with data all the time. So why don't you survey these people or get them to stick post-its on the wall, colour code different approaches to segmentation. There's no golden rules here. This will be different for every department or every organisation, but put some effort into understanding the different types of people in your organisation, and then you've got a higher order understanding, which you can obviously do something with. How many people have you got that are in that bottom right-hand bucket? Are they feeling fulfilled? Have you got too many of them? Is everybody in the bottom left thinking about it, and the litter's growing around you, and the fire hose is still on? So you can understand that. You can plug the gaps, a bit like the, do we know what people are not watching? Question. We can plug the gaps, we can have segment treatment plans. What are we going to do for each of these segments? And we can have segment migration plans, etc. Okay, and then finally, how would you put it into practice? Well, most organisations have, they use forms of talent management. So there's a 9-box grid used for talent management. You can Google it. I've just modified it here to use it for innovation management. So your people managers will be sitting down once a month, once a quarter, to talk about the people in their team and whether they're performing and what their potential is. That's happening. You might not be involved in those sessions, but in a good organisation, it's happening. So why not add, don't put another meeting in, but use that same meeting to talk about innovation. You've got all your people mapped. Where are they? Where do you want them to be? Any problem children? Any people that are performing high but not realising their innovation potential? Okay, very quickly, just to wrap up, and then I'll leave you with a couple of challenges. This is it wasn't in the agenda, but it's to try and bring those last two big sections together. All the data science you can do and all the stuff you can do to help apply it. Anyone recognise this in the bottom left? Somebody probably wasn't even born when it came out. over and produced a paper in '95 called Data Mining, New Insights, New Challenges. And it was basically saying that the data mining landscape is confused because everybody's talking about different things. Some are talking about churn, some are talking about neural networks, some are talking about decision trees, some are talking about Ross Quinlan's ID3. But they're all different things, they're different levels. Most of what we've talked about today are the applications, how you take stuff and apply it to your problems. Beneath that, so if we take churn, for example, or retention, there's a number of operations you could use. You might segment, so things that sit in here are things like prediction, segmentation, or classifier systems, or you can talk about supervised and unsupervised learning, parametric, non-parametric. There are families of things you can do. So for a churn problem, you might build a regression model or a decision tree. They're techniques, but they're both predictive operations. So I won't dwell on this too much, but we've focused on applications, and they're really the cornerstone of all those applications we've talked about. And then you've got all the things that are not really in that pyramid, but they help you drive the value of science into your business. So this slide was really just to put everything I've talked about on one page, and then just talk about emphasis. So without trying to be too judgmental, academic focus a lot about that. They do engage with industry. Turing Institute, Society of Data Miners do that. Reaching out for examples of how we can better use data, how we can develop new techniques. I put a layer beneath this, which is implementations. So you might have your shade tree here, but there's 20 ways of implementing the shade tree. So a lot of the data science, big data stuff I hear about today is in that the lower layers of that pyramid. How we solving largely the same applications. You could argue that we're doing them faster or smarter or doing things we couldn't do before because we can mine more data. But largely it's that bottom area. Corporate focus is typically up there. They don't care whether you're using a decision tree or a dice. Yeah, they just want their numbers. And I've put the value scorecard in there because that's important to the business to help prioritize across the landscape. And I'd argue that decision IDS, which is that big box, we obviously live in this world, but to make that world happen, we have to do this, and we have to keep across this. We don't go as deep or as broad in some of the things that will be done in academia or other more scientific organisations, but we've got to reach down into that either through partnerships or affiliations or through employing bright people that actually do that. Okay, how much longer have I got, Tom? I've got.
If you wrapped up in 2 minutes, that would be great.
Okay, so I'm going to leave you with four. I'll focus on 2 of them. The first one I'm not going to talk about at all. So these are problems that I've got that you guys could help me with. Probably should have started with these, shouldn't I? Inverting the storyline. The first one I won't spend any time on, and you probably can't help me with. This is how do I deal with all the departments in Sky that want more of me? All these, not just they're not even speaking the same language. Yeah, how do I do that? That's a challenge that you have to deal with. The second one's fun. How do we, you know the saying, use a picture to paint 1,000 words. I'll just step through this rather than say them twice. A picture paints 1,000 words. All that date, I've got the 1,000 words, but what picture do I draw? And the subtitle here is a bit ironic. It made my wife laugh when I was trying to explain it to her at 11 o'clock last night, and she gave up and went to bed. The ironic thing is we start off with pictures, just think of viewing data. We show you millions of pictures. We then codify how you behave in your reaction to the pictures. So we then get thousands of words describing the pictures of ours you've watched. And then we try and draw a picture to describe the words that describe how, yeah. So there's no picture for that. It's just a visual, etc. This is a very, very interesting one for me. And the main question on this one and the next one is how far can I go? And subplot, am I barking? So imagine a world where, I didn't talk about TAO. TAO is one of the segmentations. It stands for triggers, actions, and outcomes. It's a thing we do. Some people call it customer journey analysis, customer dynamics. But we look at every interaction a customer's had with us. We group up the little interactions into episodes, and then we look at a customer series of episodes with us over time. So we've got a customer heat map, if you like, of or longitudinal view, or DNA, whatever you want to call it. But for each one of those, when they contact us or we contact them, there's an intent. So this is the second bit. We've got 15 broadly things that customers interact with us for, or we interact with them for. Trading, they want to buy something, they want to stop something. Service, there's no satellite signal, or broadband's no good, or they want to phone us up and tell us how wonderful all our content is. So we've got all of those interactions, episodes, and the intent there. We've got a constant flow of a dozen types of engagement. So we've got the viewing engagement, we've got what they, the usage of their broadband or their web traffic, etc. And that's their streams of activity going on. So we know that when someone calls us in, we know what they've watched yesterday, etc. Call it slowly changing dimensions of customer state. So we know, let's call it 2,000 things about every customer. Some of those change. Gender doesn't change that often. Some things change every month. Some change based on life events, etc. But we've got that codified for our customers and for prospects. Most of it publicly available data, and then our own transactional stuff. Codified environmental factors. I talked about the weather earlier on. We've got the economy, the competitor spend, whether they're cable, under the ground, outside the house you live, that's written down. And imagine if you had that for more than 10 million customers, households in the UK, and most of it goes back over 10 years. Imagine, we've got it all. That's the 1,000 words. But Piaget, and I carry a lot with me from the early days, Tom. We pick it up, we put it down, we forgot where it was. It's object presence, isn't it? I think. So how do you do that? We've had goes at all of these, and I'd be lying if I said we were successful with any of them. Deep learning comes in from the right. But could we use agent-based reasoning? Could we codify every one of our customers? All those models that I talked about, set them as attribute states. Interactions with the customers, make them propensity models. So if I give you a price rise, you're more likely to churn. If your satellite, you've reported your satellite signals down, you're going to be less happy on your brand dimension. Your Markov models, customers can exist in one of 87 states. We use that for our forecasting. So week on week, we can track the probability of people moving between customer states, but it's a trading segmentation. Would that work? If we put all that data in and looked at every customer in 87 states for 10 years, what would we see? That. And so on. So that's a challenge. But imagine if we could do that, and we built one of them, which is this central brain. Realised for any one of these, or all of them, if you like. So quick show. Am I barking? Anyone? Anyone do this for me tomorrow? What you need is a dupe. So that's challenge number one, really, or two, visualization, which builds into this, because you need a lot of that. I call it visualization, but it's the higher order, the nomenclature, the language you need to raise the thinking, to codify what's happening. The next bit, shame that Andrew left the room, because I mentioned to this last time I was here. The OODA loop, quick show of hands, anyone heard of the OODA loop? Ooh. Okay, so I'll do it really quickly. An American pilot called John Boyd came up with this thing called the OODA loop, which is that. And he was basically saying that it's a way of modelling interactions with the world. It was developed decades ago. It's still used by many large organisations, many industries today, but also obviously in the military around the world. And what it crudely says, and I'd encourage you all to, well, if you've got any interest in this kind of thing, to go and read it, is that how you interact with the world and how you learn about the world is based upon what you observe, how you relate what you observe to what you know about the world, how you decide what to do, and then how you do stuff and how you learn as you go through. So in the fighter pilot world, if I don't see the other pilot coming, I'm dead. But I've got to see him, understand what to do very quickly based on what I know, and then I've got to act. And hopefully I'll do that loop quick enough so that by the time I'm acting, he's still observing or he's still thinking. So the brain would sit at this, and this is what is our mental model which underpins our understanding of our customer behaviours. What do we need to observe? What do we see? And how do we relate what we see to our understanding? So if a customer wants to churn, what does that mean in terms of our understanding of that customer? What are we going to do? Yeah, so this is IQ land, that's great. But what are we going to do about it? And then let's do it. But in doing it, let's make sure we learn from it. So I'd encourage you to read this, maybe put it down for 5 years and then come back and read it again. First time I read it, I got, oh, so you've got to be quick, you know, the fighter pilot that gets through that loop as quickly as possible. But it's not. What's actually more important is understanding what you need to observe and being able to relate that to your understanding, being able to codify your knowledge so that you can access it quickly. But more importantly, and this is very difficult in a large organisation like Sky, having the confidence and the ability to deconstruct that understanding and put it back together. So we know what causes churn. It's these 10 things. You know, my boss tells me every day, but something's just moved. You know, Netflix has been launched. Yeah, but we know what impacts churn. So they've got this fixed mental model, some of it based on myth, a lot of which we've dispelled. But how do you deconstruct, how do you build that mental model, but then how do you have the agility to deconstruct it and reconstruct it based on what you're seeing? These next two are very interesting to me. So is it hard for any of you in the room to accept that every time you make a decision, you're making a guess? You can only make a decision based on the information you know. You can't know everything, surely. So you're making an assumption, you're making a decision based on the information you have at your disposal. But that's not a bad thing. You know, that's the best you can do. But in that context, the action you do, what you do, you should design. So Boyd talks about it as a hypothesis. You should design your action so that you can learn from it. So you've got everything you know, you accept that you can make decisions based on that. But when you design your actions, you should build something into your action so that you plug in a bit of the stuff you don't know. So in the old marketing loop, I said I'd come back to a loop. You know, we'd call it test and learn. You know, but that's, you know, if I send them a pink envelope, they'll respond, and if a blue one, they won't. But how do you get that combined with all of this stuff around a centralized brain? So that's the last slide. I end up with a question. Am I a bit? But thank you very much. It's been very useful. I know I've massively overrun, but hopefully we've still got some time for questions.
Gavin,
thank you.
Thank you very much.